The call button shouldn't have worked. Riverside Elementary had been condemned for 3 months. Power lines severed, gas mains capped. But at 2:47 a.m., our dispatch system logged an active fire alarm from classroom 3B. And I heard children singing Ring Around the Rosie through my radio static. I'm Kevin O'Neill, 23 years with Station 19, seen everything from kitchen grease fires to five-alarm industrial disasters. I've pulled bodies from collapsed buildings and delivered babies in burning apartments. Nothing rattles me anymore. At least, that's what I told myself driving through the October rain toward a school that should have been silent as a grave. Riverside Elementary had burned 4 months prior. Electrical fire in the old wiring started around midnight during summer break. Thank God no kids were inside. The structure was stable enough, but the district condemned it anyway. Too much smoke damage. Asbestos concerns, insurance politics. The kind of bureaucratic nightmare that leaves a perfectly good building to rot while lawyers argue. But tonight, something was different. The automated alarm system had somehow reactivated itself, sending a signal through dead circuits to our dispatch center. The report showed multiple smoke detectors triggered in sequential order, moving through the building like someone was walking from room to room. My captain figured it was probably water damage causing electrical shorts, but protocol demanded a response. I'd been to Riverside dozens of times over the years for false alarms and minor incidents. Knew every hallway, every exit, every corner where kids liked to hide during fire drills. The place had good bones, solid brick construction from the 1960s, wide corridors, plenty of windows. Even after the fire, the basic structure remained sound. Rolling up to the school, my headlights swept across the boarded windows and yellow caution tape fluttering in the wind. The parking lot was empty except for debris scattered by recent storms. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it 3 months ago during our final safety inspection. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. I grabbed my thermal imaging camera and standard inspection kit from Engine. 19. Protocol for condemned structure calls required a thorough exterior assessment before entry, checking for structural integrity and obvious hazards. The October wind carried the persistent smell of smoke damage, that acrid combination of burned plastic, charred wood, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Walking the perimeter, I documented everything through my radio. Station 19 to dispatch, conducting exterior sweep of Riverside Elementary. No visible smoke, no heat signatures on thermal. Building appears structurally sound from outside. The front entrance had been properly secured with steel plates bolted over the doors. All windows were boarded with fire-rated plywood, each marked with our department's safety stickers. Standard fire investigation procedure involves checking all possible entry points. I tested each board with my pry bar, making sure the security measures remained intact. The school had been sealed tight after our final inspection. No signs of vandalism or attempted break-ins. Even the graffiti from neighborhood kids stopped at the property line. Nobody wanted to mess with a burned school. But my thermal imaging camera picked up something strange along the east wall. The readings showed a temperature variance of exactly 37 degrees Fahrenheit in classroom 3B, the same room triggering the alarm system. In October weather, interior temperatures should have been ambient, maybe 10 degrees cooler due to lack of heating. This difference suggested an active heat source. I radioed the anomaly to dispatch. Engine 19 to control. Thermal readings indicate possible heat source in classroom 3B, requesting permission to investigate interior. The response crackled through static. Permission granted. Maintain radio contact every 10 minutes. I noted the time. 3:12 a.m. Finding an entry point meant locating the maintenance access we'd used during post-fire inspections. Around back, near the kitchen loading dock, a single panel of plywood had been designated for emergency access. I removed the bolts with my socket wrench, noting each one was exactly as we'd left it, no signs of tampering. The maintenance door opened with a metallic groan that echoed through empty corridors. I switched on my high-powered LED flashlight, illuminating smoke-stained walls and water-damaged ceiling tiles. The smell hit me immediately, stronger now, that burned plastic odor mixed with something organic and sweet, like overripe fruit. Every surface bore witness to the fire's path. Soot marks traced the walls like black fingerprints, showing exactly where superheated gases had traveled through the building. My footsteps echoed in the silence, creating an almost rhythmic pattern against the damaged linoleum floors. The hallway stretched ahead toward the classroom wing. Emergency exit signs hung at odd angles, their plastic housings melted and distorted. Water damage from our suppression efforts had caused ceiling tiles to sag and drop, creating an obstacle course of debris. I documented each hazard through my radio, maintaining professional protocol. But something felt wrong about the building's acoustics. My voice should have echoed differently in a space this size. Instead, sounds seemed muffled, as if the air itself was absorbing them. When I stopped walking, the silence was absolute. No settling creaks. No distant traffic noise, no wind through broken windows. I checked my radio reception. 3 bars, clear signal to dispatch. My thermal camera continued showing that 37-degree variance in classroom 3B, now only 50 feet ahead. The temperature reading was rock solid, not fluctuating like it would from residual heat or environmental factors. This was consistent, localized, and completely inexplicable. As I approached the classroom wing, my flashlight beam caught something unusual. The floor tiles leading to room 3B showed a pattern I hadn't noticed during previous inspections. Small circular marks in the soot and debris. Not footprints exactly, but impressions about the size of a child's shoe. They formed a neat line down the center of the hallway, spaced perfectly for small running steps. My radio crackled to life. Engine 19, 10-minute check. What's your status? I glanced at my watch. 3:22 a.m., all clear so far. Approaching classroom 3B to investigate heat source. Structural integrity, good, no immediate hazards. But even as I spoke, I noticed something that made me stop mid-sentence. The classroom door to 3B was standing open. I distinctly remembered from our post-fire inspection that every door in this wing had been closed and marked with safety tape. The tape was still there, hanging in perfect strips on either side of the door frame. But the door itself was wide open, revealing only darkness beyond my flashlight's reach. I stood in that doorway for a full 30 seconds, training my flashlight beam across classroom 3B. The thermal camera confirmed the heat source was definitely inside, but my light revealed only the expected fire-damaged charred desks, blackened walls, collapsed sections of ceiling. Nothing that should generate heat. Standard operating procedure dictated I radio this anomaly to dispatch immediately. But as I reached for my radio, I heard something that stopped my hand mid-motion. Singing. Very faint, like it was coming from far away. But unmistakably the sound of children's voices carrying a tune I recognized from my own elementary school days. Ring round the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The melody drifted through the empty classroom, seeming to echo from multiple directions at once. My radio remained silent. Whatever I was hearing wasn't coming through the static. This was something in the physical space, acoustic waves traveling through air and reaching my ears directly. I swept my flashlight across the room again, slower this time, checking every corner and shadow. The beam illuminated something I'd missed before. Child-sized handprints pressed into the soot on the walls. Too many to count, forming patterns around the room like decorations. Fresh handprints, not from before the fire. The suit should have been bone dry after 3 months, but these impressions looked recent, almost wet. My training kicked in. 23 years of emergency response had taught me to document everything and trust my instruments over my senses. I activated my radio, Engine 19, to dispatch. I'm observing some unusual conditions in classroom 3B. Thermal readings confirmed, but I'm also detecting acoustic anomalies. Static filled my earpiece. Then, Engine 19, please repeat. We're not reading your signal clearly. I tried again. Dispatch. "This is O'Neill at Riverside Elementary. Do you copy?" Nothing but white noise. I checked my radio, still showing 3 bars, but somehow the connection had failed. In 23 years, I'd never lost contact with dispatch during a routine inspection. The singing grew louder. Not just one voice now, but what sounded like an entire classroom of children, their voices blending in perfect harmony. The melody echoed off the fire-damaged walls, creating layers of sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I faced a decision that went against every instinct I'd developed as a firefighter. Professional protocol demanded I maintain radio contact with dispatch. If I couldn't communicate, I should evacuate immediately and call for backup. But those voices, if they were real, if there were somehow children in this building, I couldn't just leave. The internal battle was fierce. My rational mind cataloged all the evidence. Condemned building, no possible entry points, temperatures that defied physics, radio failure at exactly the wrong moment. Everything pointed to equipment malfunction or environmental factors I didn't understand. But my gut told me something different. Those voices weren't echoes or audio tricks. They were desperate, scared, and calling for help. I stepped into classroom 3B, sweeping my flashlight across the space methodically. The thermal camera showed the heat source was concentrated near the teacher's desk at the front of the room. As I approached, the temperature reading climbed 40 degrees, 45, 50 degrees above ambient. But my flashlight revealed nothing except more fire damage. The singing stopped abruptly. Complete silence filled the classroom, so profound it made my ears ring. I could hear my own heartbeat, my breathing, the slight electronic hum from my thermal camera. But no wind, no settling sounds from the building, no distant traffic. It was as if the entire world had gone quiet to listen. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish but unable to stop myself. "Is anyone in here?" My voice echoed once, sharp and clear, then died. No response. But as the echo faded, I heard something that made my skin crawl, the sound of small feet running across the floor above my head. Not one child, but several, their footsteps creating a pattern like they were playing a game. I aimed my flashlight at the ceiling, trying to calculate exactly where the sounds were coming from. Directly above classroom 3B was room 4B, part of the upper grade wing. We'd inspected that area thoroughly during our post-fire assessment. The floor was structurally sound but covered in debris. No way anyone could run up there without making much more noise. The footsteps stopped. Then, drifting down through the damaged ceiling, came a voice so clear it could have been spoken directly into my ear. "Mr. O'Neill, we're scared." That voice knew my name. After 23 years of emergency calls, I'd heard plenty of people call out for help, but never in a condemned building where no one should exist. The voice was young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with that particular quality children's voices have when they're trying very hard not to cry. I grabbed my radio again, desperate to re-establish contact with dispatch. But instead of static, I heard something impossible, the sound of children whispering my name, over and over coming through the radio speakers. Kevin ... Kevin ... Kevin ... a dozen different voices. Maybe more, all calling for me with increasing urgency. My thermal camera beeped an alert. The temperature in the room had spiked to 75 degrees above ambient, concentrated in a narrow column rising from floor to ceiling near the teacher's desk. But when I pointed my flashlight at that exact spot, I saw something that should have been impossible. Small shoe prints in the ash and debris, leading from the classroom door to the teacher's desk, then stopping abruptly, as if whoever made them had simply vanished into thin air. The prints were fresh, pressing through layers of fire damage that should have been undisturbed for months, and they were exactly the right size for elementary school children. I knelt down and touched one of the prints with my gloved finger. The ash was warm, almost hot, and moved under pressure like it had just been disturbed. Around each footprint, the debris showed signs of recent displacement, small stones and chunks of ceiling tile pushed aside by whatever had passed this way. The voices started again, but this time they weren't singing. They were calling my name, all of them together, their young voices creating a chorus that seemed to rise from the very walls of the classroom. Kevin, help us. Kevin, we're lost. Kevin, we can't find the way out. The voices surrounded me completely now, from every direction at once. Kevin, we're scared. Kevin, help us. Kevin, where are you? I spun in place, sweeping my flashlight across the classroom. The beam caught movement in my peripheral vision, small shadows darting between the damaged desks. When I turned toward them, they vanished. When I looked away, they reappeared at the edge of my vision. My thermal camera was going crazy. Temperature readings spiked and dropped in rapid succession. 50 degrees, 20 degrees, 80 degrees. The numbers changed faster than the display could update. The radio crackled to life. Static mixed with whispers. Children's voices speaking over each other in urgent overlapping fragments. Fire drill, fire drill. Fire drill, where's the exit? I can't breathe, mommy, 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 I tried to key my radio. My hand shook as I pressed the transmit button. Dispatch, this is O'Neill. I need immediate backup at Riverside Elementary. Something's wrong here. Something's very wrong. The response came not through the radio, but from directly behind me. We followed the rules, Mr. O'Neill. I turned around slowly. A little girl stood near the teacher's desk. Maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and pigtails, and wearing a school uniform that should have been burned away months ago. She was translucent, like looking at someone through water, but absolutely real. More children appeared. One by one they materialized from the shadows between the desks. A boy with freckles and a gap-toothed smile. Twin girls holding hands. A tall kid with glasses that reflected my flashlight beam. All of them looking at me with eyes that held too much sadness for their young faces. We did everything right during the fire drill, the first girl continued. We lined up quietly. We walked, we didn't run. We stayed together and listened for instructions. My flashlight beam passed right through them, but my thermal camera registered their presence as distinct heat signatures. They were there and not there simultaneously. But the smoke was so thick, said the boy with freckles, and the lights went out, and we couldn't find the door. More voices joined in. A chorus of young voices all speaking at once, their words overlapping but somehow perfectly clear. We waited for someone to come get us. We called for help. We followed the emergency plan, but nobody came. I backed toward the door. My training screamed at me to evacuate immediately. This was beyond any emergency protocol I'd ever learned. But the children moved with me, surrounding me in a semicircle, their transparent faces filled with desperate hope. "You came," said the tall boy with glasses. "You finally came. We've been calling for so long," whispered the twin girls in unison. My back hit the doorframe. I could run. I should run. But looking at their faces, I understood something that made my chest tight with grief and rage. These weren't ghosts. They were echoes. Impressions left behind by children who had died not in some old tragedy, but in the fire 4 months ago. The fire that was supposed to have happened when the school was empty. "The night security guard," I whispered. He said the building was clear. The children nodded sadly. "We were having a sleepover in the library," said the girl with pigtails. "A reading program. Just 12 of us with Mrs. Patterson. She went to find help," said another voice. "She told us to stay together and wait. But she never came back." My radio erupted with sound. Not static this time, but voices I recognized. Dispatch, my captain, other firefighters from that night 4 months ago. Their conversations played back like recordings, discussing the empty building and the successful evacuation. All clear, no occupants reported. Structural damage only. Thank God. Lucky it happened during summer break. But underneath their voices, I heard something else. Faint calls for help that had been dismissed as wind through broken windows. Children's voices calling out from the library wing. while we focused our efforts on the electrical fire in the opposite end of the building. The thermal readings on my camera showed the truth. 12 small heat signatures clustered near the library entrance, growing fainter and fainter as smoke filled their refuge. Readings that our equipment had missed because we weren't looking for them. Readings that had faded to nothing by the time we declared the building secure. "We tried to get out," the boy with freckles said, "but the smoke was too thick, and the library door was stuck, and Mrs. Patterson never came back to show us the way." I looked at each of their faces. 12 children. 12 little lives lost because of a miscommunication, a failed head count, a security guard who hadn't checked every room. Tears blurred my vision. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "We should have found you. We should have looked harder." The girl with pigtails stepped closer. When she spoke, her voice was gentle and forgiving. "You're here now," she said. "You answered when we called. Will you help us find the way out?" I looked toward the hallway, toward the exit I knew would lead to safety. Then I looked back at the children's hopeful faces. "Yes," I said. "I'll help you find the way out." The moment I spoke those words, my thermal camera registered a massive temperature drop. The readings plummeted from 80 degrees to ambient in seconds. The oppressive heat that had filled the classroom dissipated completely. The children smiled. One by one, they began to fade, their transparent forms growing lighter until they disappeared entirely. The last to go was the girl with pigtails. She looked at me with eyes full of gratitude and whispered something I'll never forget. "Thank you for finally hearing us." Then she was gone, and I was alone in classroom 3B, with only my flashlight beam illuminating the fire damage and debris. My radio crackled back to life with perfect clarity. "Engine 19, this is dispatch. You missed your 20-minute check. What's your status?" I looked at my watch. 4:17 a.m. Somehow I'd lost nearly an hour inside that classroom, but it felt like only minutes had passed since I'd heard the first voice calling my name. "Engine 19 to dispatch." I radioed back, my voice hoarse. "Inspection complete. No heat source detected. Building remained secure." The lie came as a lie, but it was the only truth I could share. Some experiences don't translate into official reports. Walking back through those empty hallways, I felt different. Lighter somehow, but also carrying a weight I hadn't had before. The silence that had seemed so oppressive now felt peaceful, like the building itself was finally at rest. I sealed the maintenance door exactly as I'd found it, replacing each bolt and checking twice that everything was secure. But as I walked toward Engine 19, I noticed something that stopped me cold. There, in the morning, dew covering my windshield, were 12 small handprints pressed against the glass from the inside. The next day, I did something I'd never done in 23 years of service. I requested the full incident report from the Riverside Elementary fire. What I found buried in the paperwork made my blood run cold. A single line item, filed 3 days after we'd declared the scene secure. 12 students and 1 teacher reported missing following unauthorized overnight reading program. Last seen at Riverside Elementary Library, 8 p.m., night of fire. The report had been processed as a separate incident handled by missing persons instead of the fire department. No one had connected the dots. No one had told us to look for children in a building that was supposed to be empty. I drove back to Riverside Elementary that evening, not on official business, but carrying something I'd bought from the florist downtown. 12 small white roses and 1 larger one for Mrs. Patterson. I placed them against the memorial plaque that had been installed outside the school, a plaque that listed no names, only the inscription, "In memory of those lost too soon." 2 weeks later, I received a package at the station with no return address. Inside was a manila folder containing 13 death certificates, officially dated the night of the fire but somehow never filed with the county. Each one bore the stamp of Dr. Sarah Morrison from the coroner's office, a woman I'd worked with on dozens of emergency calls over the years. Attached was a handwritten note. "Kevin, these were supposed to be processed months ago, but they kept getting lost in the system. Thought you should see them. The library security camera footage is being transferred to Highway 49 evidence storage next week. in case anyone ever needs to review what really happened that night. I never spoke to Dr. Morrison about the note. Some conversations are too dangerous for both parties. But I understood the message. The truth was being preserved, even if it couldn't be officially acknowledged. 3 months later, Riverside Elementary was quietly demolished. No ceremony, no media coverage, just bulldozers and dump trucks removing every trace of the building where 13 lives had ended in confusion and fear. But sometimes, driving past the empty lot on my way to other calls, I swear I can still hear children's laughter carried on the wind. I kept those death certificates in my locker at the station, sealed in a manila envelope marked personal. They serve as a reminder of something my training manual never covered, that sometimes the most important part of our job isn't fighting fires or saving lives. Sometimes it's simply listening when someone calls for help, even if that call comes months too late. And sometimes, late at night when I'm on duty, I still hear those footsteps running through empty hallways. But now they sound different. Not desperate or frightened, but free. Like children who finally found their way to recess after being kept inside too long.